And I do.
Oh no, you're good. You can keep talking, but I'll cut all the stuff out and like edit. But like, you guys, hello, everybody, and welcome back to this week's episode of the Master Your Mental podcast. As you guys can see, we are diving into all things spiritual healing today, and of course, I am not alone here. I have the beautiful and multi-talented Brit Shane with me to break this down. Brit is an amazing person I actually had the pleasure of meeting here in Arizona through a very cool organization called the Arizona Entrepreneurs. Brit is a mastermind behind Space Face, Arizona Beauty Co., an entrepreneur consultant, spiritual coach, and motivational speaker. And I have had the pleasure also of watching Brit dive into her story on stage at the Just Grow podcast live event, also hosted here in Arizona as well by the incredible Nick Arapkiles. But before I say too much, I want to introduce you guys to Brit so she can take the stage and break down what spiritual healing is all about, how she got into it, how it catapulted her life to breathtaking heights, and how you can get started. So without further ado, welcome Brit Shane to the podcast.
You're amazing. Can I just keep you with me all the time, and you can just say before I enter every room, you just
Yes, the hype girl.
the
We're
hype
out
girl.
here.
I was
Let's
like,
get it.
okay, let me live up to that hype. Let's
Hey,
go.
hey. Oh no. We're gonna get it today, you guys. But no, I'm super excited. And before we go ahead and dive on into this, I would love to know this answer from you. I always love seeing what people say. So if you could tell us what is the number one thing that lights you up like none other in this life?
I love that. My instant thought is to know that something that I've done, said, or my existence has deeply impacted someone else's life.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's such an important, incredible thing to know. And I'm sure you have people in your life that you've probably helped that maybe haven't even verbalized to you how much an impact that you've made. And I think it's so important and powerful when someone says, because you were born or because you breathe, it puts tears in my eyes, like because you're here, my life got better. And so man, like I don't think that there's anything possession wise or experience wise that quite does that, you know?
No, and I just hearing you say that resonates so much with me, especially the part you brought up of the people who haven't expressed that, right? Or who haven't,
Mhm.
because I feel like when you get it, you'll all through different mediums, right? Like people will send you a text or a DM or a call or a voice message or in person and say, hey, this thing that you did or created or talked about, really helped me through this or gain a better understanding. And honestly, like that is exactly how I feel. And I literally like, cause it's so true. Like to know that what you're doing is having a impact on someone else's life in a way that they probably haven't had the opportunity to get access to yet, through different things they've
Mhm.
tried out. So that's really what I really admire in you, and just seeing that in you, especially at the Just Grow event too, like where you really were just up there completely vulnerable, sharing your story. And that's another thing that I admire too, is the strength to do that, because it is definitely very difficult to get into topics that you were willing to explore when it comes to different things like trauma, depression, overcoming different things that
Mhm.
were traumatic in childhood to really begin the work of spiritual
Mhm.
healing. So if you could kind of take us on the like a little journey, like what did your journey look like to coming across spiritual healing, and what has that been like?
That's a really good question. So I am 34. I have loved spiritual healing since I was very little. I always was a super weird kid and call it because it was the movies that I was watching or whatever. I just always thought that I could do magic since I was very little, which is so unhinged now in my life to think about how convinced I was. I would hold things in my hand and I think, I know that I can make this float. I know it. I'd stare at my door and just imagine that I could make it slam. And that never happened. So, but I did learn that the power of my thoughts and my feelings could shift my reality. And I feel like I started getting really into the woo woo stuff, as people would call it, when I was in elementary school, because I always would know things that other people wouldn't know. So people's names or And my parents would play this game with me. I don't even know if we talked about this at the podcast, but they would take playing cards. And it was either my parents or my baby. I can't remember because I was young, like elementary school. And they would flip the cards and I would guess the card and I would guess the card and I would guess the card. So it got to the point where they'd say, guess our waiter's name, and then I would get it. Or we'd drive into a new neighborhood and I remember my stepmom saying, okay, Miss Psychic, which house is ours? So that is in everyone, that psychic gift. But what happens is trauma, pain, sadness, as like mental health, things like that, it really clouds your ability to hear. And so when I got a little bit older and I probably turned off, let's say I turned that gift down, I dialed it way down to survive high school. Because just like everyone else, I wanted to be included and popular. And I was such a weirdo. And I am a weirdo now, but in a way that's now trendy, right? So when I got after college, I realized, wow, I feel very disconnected. I don't feel like there was a period where I had trauma. I had the loss of my best friend and I stopped crying.
Mhm.
So to make a super long, how did I become a spiritual healer? Short, it was I started as one, I lost it due to life trauma, depression, sadness, abuse, pain, and turned off. And then I quit crying, quit feeling. And so in an attempt to me to crack myself back open, I decided to go and learn how to be a Reiki master around the age of 24 or 25. So that was really Reiki was the first, I did the first and second level all the way through master, which for those of you listening that don't know, master just means that then now you can initiate other people into the healing practice. And then just over the years, I will, if you ask a lot of our friends, like I'll do healings in bars just randomly, if I feel like somebody's dark or in a weird place, I'm like, okay, let's go sit down. I'm going to clear you. Not that that is totally advised, but I've been working with it long enough that I feel okay doing it. But and I think that now as I get a little bit further in, I feel called to be a healer so that the energy that comes through me when I'm near other people helps and impacts them. Right.
Mm. Oh
So
my
that's kind of
gosh.
how, yeah. And I
Wow.
think
And
everybody that can do it.
yeah.
Everybody. We all have that. We all can be healers. It's inherent. It's just blocked, turned off, or inaccessible to us.
Wow. And you guys, oh my gosh, I'm always sitting out here with a little notebook writing things down so I make sure I'm getting all of these nuggets to reiterate to you guys, because especially when you're talking about this concept of the thoughts and beliefs with the spiritual healing and then having
Mm,
it be blocked and turned off, because when especially when you mentioned going through these different things, like you started out having it as a young age and then lost it through the abuse, lost it, and then at 24 got back into Reiki and doing those kind of different things, which I think is so amazing and so interesting. And that's actually very true, because I'm sitting here listening to you kind of go back into this journey and share these different pieces.
mhm,
And I'm like, wow, that sounds a lot like what I can relate to. Like when you said
yeah,
dialing this back and turning it down so you're not so like when you
mhm,
get in front of different places or environments or people. But that's so powerful, especially when you talk about these beliefs. And I would love for you kind of to get into like, so basically at a point when you didn't have access to this stuff anymore and you weren't practicing this, when it comes down to like a daily routine that you have or habits in place, how did that impact the thoughts that were coming across and the beliefs that you were having in yourself? And what was that effect like in your life?
I think I just allowed myself for a lot of years to be broken, to
Mhm.
be sad and in a dark place and using drugs and drinking. And there was a lot of my life where I didn't necessarily remember this side of myself. And
Mhm.
I always have this sentence, or this doctrine of thought that I really believe, and that's there is part free will, the free
Mhm.
will to where do I want to live, who do I want to date, da 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 da. But I believe in some capacity, and as I get older and more evolved, this belief system changes and evolves. I believe on some level, I decided to be here. I believe we all asked to be here, we begged to be here. Believe it or not, there's a line of souls out the door that would love to be here on Earth and have this experience. And I believe the ones who got chosen are here to potentially help raise the consciousness of the entire planet. So that being said, the reason I bring that up is because people like you, like you're a healer, I'm a healer. We are always going to be called back to that journey. I just think sometimes we lose the manual. We're like,
Mhm.
okay, I'm completely lost. But one of the upsides and the downsides is if let's just say the dark side exists. Let's say lower frequencies the devil, whatever you want to call it, not that I'm saying it does or doesn't, but let's say that is real, they're going to potentially waste as much of your time as they possibly can. So I'll always tell my friends, I go, I'm not even over here fighting against the devil. I'm over here fighting against the time wasting, the sadness, the low vibrations, the moments where you don't even want to get out of bed, because that is how they attack people like you and I. That's what I believe. So that's kind of how I feel. I feel like I was really open and available, and it got scary, and I felt like it was a side of the world that I didn't know. And I don't know if you've ever had paranormal experiences or anything, but it's very intense when you're a kid. And I
Mhm.
thought, middle finger, no way. And
Mhm.
I was like, off, let's go turn it off. And then now I got really strong and none of that stuff happens to me anymore. And I think that I was always going to get back here.
Mhm.
And you brought up Arizona entrepreneurs and Devin and I met before he even appeared here, but that was just the perfect example of like a path that was coming. It was going to come, and I was going to get back on the yellow brick road back to my, and now all of our friends are so incredible and spiritual, and I can be as weird as I want. Nobody's going to say anything, but I think that it's more like you're turned off, whether that's by dark energy or whether that's by your own choice, and maybe a
Mhm.
combo of both. And then depending on what your purpose is and what the prayers you are, you're going to be turned back on, whether it's death, illness, losing a job, losing a spouse. I don't think that if you're meant to be awake that you can stay asleep. I think you
Mhm.
can try. Like Lord
Yeah.
knows I tried. I know you tried too, and it was always just this little voice like, yeah, no, maybe we shouldn't have that last drink, or maybe we shouldn't date that boy, or maybe we should, but I thought, I'm going to plug my ears and ignore it. But now it's why I get uncomfortable if I ignore it. Like now it's so
Yes.
loud. It's like, you can't.
Oh my gosh. And just the evolution to that, just hearing you break down all those pieces, a big word that came up for me from hearing you mention all this was shame. Shame with the
Yes.
stigma of anything related
Yes.
to, when we're talking about grief or loss or trauma or even your mental health or mental
Yep.
illness or whatever diagnosis or not you've been told or you're thinking about, having that internally that is you
Hmm.
as an obstacle that's stopping you from connecting and from
Yes.
being able to have these conversations, and like you said, keeping you in that low vibrational state where you don't want to wake up, you don't want to do these things, you
Hmm.
don't want to, because I remember that was a time for me when, very, very, very difficult to get up, to do things, to be,
Yes.
want to go into rooms. Absolutely not. Just could
Yes.
not. And just hearing you share that, I was like, oh my goodness, and it is. And like you said, you try to stay that way. And I need to stay asleep. But then
Mm.
when you're finally able to break through that, and that's the key, right? Is being able to do that, to really be that voice and that light for others
Mhm.
who can see that in you, and they say, wow, like, why can't I, start this some way, in some capacity, this journey or this conversation, to really move myself out of this in some way, in some form, because this person is doing this. And that's
Yes.
exactly what you provided when you were up there on that stage speaking with Nick about your story, because I know me, and I don't know, everyone else in the audience was crying, and I'm like, were you guys crying? You cry, your makeup looks pretty good, but I don't know. And I'm just like, cuz it's like,
Yeah.
how can you not feel that when now I'm so open to it, but I definitely feel you when you're talking about the blocks of,
Yeah.
I don't want to go there, and I don't have I feel like it's almost at the capacity, because you really are kind of telling yourself like, this is how it's been, and this is how it has
Mhm.
happened, and like the progression, and how are you going to stop yourself? Because I mean, I don't know if you were like one of the Tumblr people back in the day, but I know I came across my old account, and just when you can go, it's like,
Mm.
oh, like you can scroll back and see kind of like how you, and I'm like, I was like crying. I'm like, is this really what I used to think that?
Emo. Yeah.
Yes. And I'm like, oh my
Mhm.
goodness. And it's so eye-opening and this is what these conversations are all about, is just accessing the solutions that you've come across when you're talking
Right.
about this work, when you're talking about this healing, and getting into Reiki, and changing your environments and your relationships and your
Mm.
habits and your thinking,
The
and diving,
relationships.
yes, and diving deeper
Mm.
into actually learning about these things and reading more. Like you talked a lot about quantum physics, and
Yeah.
I even saw a really good video that you actually did, actually YouTube video, where you were interviewing, I think it was one of your ex-boyfriends and having this conversation.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my gosh, this is so, see, like this is these conversations, like it's so important. So when you, and I would just, I mean, it's just, is that kind of what the progression, I guess the progression has been like for you for coming out of that space? And
Mhm.
like, what do you do today to maintain that?
It's a great question. So I think that you're the perfect person to have this conversation with, because I want to start by saying I myself was medicated for severe mental health issues, suicide. Like, not a lot of people know this, but my first suicide attempt was when I was in fourth grade. And I didn't get to the point of ending up in a hospital, but I was literally sitting there with the option. And that's a story for another day. But I remember being so scared by that pain. And when I look back at it now, as in my 30s, I think I had severe neglect. I had severe criticism. I was completely alone in a family of five, like surrounded by people, felt so alone, and incredibly unhappy parents. It bleeds into the psyche and the soul of a child.
Mhm.
So you and I, the first time we bonded, we talked about mental health, and it is such an important thing to note that before I say any of this, there are, I believe, people who it's a chemical imbalance that is not necessarily environmental. And I do think that people are probably born on this earth, and this is your specialty, right? That
Mhm.
they just have a chemical disadvantage, and that's their scenario. And so that's not the group of people that I'm addressing when I move forward, because for me, it was very much environmental.
Mhm.
And there are still to this day, in the life that I've built, there are moments and the hours, sometimes maybe it's not even a day or a week, but there are hours sometimes where I can go back to that version of myself. And I think we've left her behind, but the medication for me was needed because I couldn't stay in a place where I didn't want to die. Like I
Mhm.
just did not want to be on earth. And for me, environment was a big part of that. And I can do as much prayer and energy healing as I want, but until I actually changed the people in my life, meaning not that there was anything wrong with anyone at any particular time, but highly incompatible to the way that I needed to be loved, I would have done as many. It's like you're sitting in a Maserati and there's no gas in the car. Like I was in the Maserati, I had all of the tools, but there's no gas. And the gas for me now is people that, like our friend group, that's they're
Mhm.
so positive that even when you have a bad day or you don't feel 100%, you can recalibrate. So for me, I was just in the muck, and I think what I did was I cut everybody out. And
Mhm.
that's not necessarily what every other person might have to do. To be honest, there's 3 of them, I can think of them right now. I didn't want them to leave. I was
Mhm.
devastated. I can think of 3 in particular. I'm like, "No, like, please
Mhm.
don't." But I was still on some level, as I said to you, I think the great healers and leaders of our time, and a lot of the people we know, right? We are all on this planet to a lot of our friends and people listening to this, you know who you are.
Mhm.
That's what we're here for. We're going to be drugged. I believe we're going to be drugged back there. And sometimes these people just had to be removed. So for me, it was kind of just lifting off some of those thorns and pulling out the shards of glass from my body. And then I felt better. So there's so many different answers to that. I think there was phases in my life where I quit drinking, and I really dialed in and I dove so deep into the pain. I would say
Mhm.
there's probably 6-month periods of time where you would not have wanted to be in the same room as me, because I was an absolute sad panda.
Yeah.
But it's like and I know you've had the phase too. It's like I just said, all right, fine. Someone told me once, if I just feel it for 90 seconds, it'll go away. And I did that over and over and over and over like a broken record, and I think eventually it alleviated, and then I was like, "Okay." It alleviates a little more and a little more, and then eventually I'm like, "Okay, I feel good, I feel better," and I could breathe again. So,
Oh my
that's what
gosh.
I think. That's what I would say. That was a long answer, but
No, that especially when you talked about the incompatible with the way that you needed to be loved. Because I
yes.
love that you brought that up, because sometimes when we think about cutting people out, I know and when you brought that up, that there's 3 people that you cut out, that was very, very challenging. That same exact thing for me. And it's like you cling to them, but I feel like it's not you're clinging to the person, you're clinging to
Yeah.
what they have inside of them, that it's keeping that inside of you. And you guys are both, whether it's, I don't know what it was, but especially when you talked about the drinking part, that was something that was
Yes.
very big for me too, that now it's like I have 2 drinks and I have a really bad hangover and I can't even It's like
Yeah.
ridiculous. I'm like, what happened to her? But it's
Yeah.
like, it's
Yeah.
called, it's called growth. Like,
Yeah,
funny,
exactly. Yeah.
but it's real, because especially when, and I love how you also talked about in that as well, when you get into diving into the pain and allowing yourself to feel that, because for so long, like you mentioned, the need, when you were struggling with these different things and having been heavily medicated, because that was also
Yeah.
my reality as well. But I also love about that is that you don't discount, like, the, like with the chemical imbalances and like the environmental
Mhm.
factors, like you're not like, okay, it's, just this, because I know in my journey, it's definitely been a struggle with, I've been on misdiagnosed, all these different things, these different
Mhm.
medicines. And, for to struggle with like, I want to, completely get off this and take nothing. But then it's like, it's just
Be
like,
normal.
it's, yeah, it's a very big
Yeah, that
struggle. So
word normal.
I love that you bring that up to maintain that, because I'd love to like kind of hear you walk me through, like, what did that look like for you when you talk about, because when you talked about diving into the pain, that brought up a lot of
Mm,
what I did to really,
mhm.
with writing my book, with going back to those things, like a lot of it was dug up and brought up, and literally
Yes.
going back into therapy just for that. So
Mhm.
I'd love to hear from you, like, what did that process look like for you of diving into that pain?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I had a lot of, and you heard some of this at the podcast, I had a lot of very traumatic things happen in my life, but the funny thing is, if I were to write a list of all the things that had happened to me that were a tragedy, someone would read the PowerPoint or the bullet point list and go, "Oh my goodness, like, how is she here?" The funny thing is, the things that some of those things that happened, they hit me later or they impacted me in the long term, but in the moment, they didn't necessarily tear me down. If I and it's funny because we're very close now, but I had a boyfriend for through about 3 years, and he was really the I hid. Let me start over. I hid my damaged soul very well
Mm,
up until the end of 2018. I hid it so well. I was already a year into my first company. I was doing great on the outside, but on the inside it was fragile. It was all a facade. And I met him, and through this perfectly aligned journey we took together, there were his life kept ripping him out of mine. And to this day now, connecting with him is like very neutral, we're friends. But I remember when we broke up, which was a lot of people actually watched me go through this last year, I never had felt pain like that in
mm,
my entire life. And it was like the pain of losing my best friend, the pain of losing my father, and the pain of just being unloved my whole life all in one moment.
mhm,
And I remember calling someone and saying, not only am I not going to be okay tomorrow, I can't get off the ground. I can't even fly to you. Like, I need you to come get me." And it was almost like stupefied tragedy of pain. And I even remember looking back now, and I can look at it in such a neutral space. I, first of all, in that moment thought, I need therapy. The
mhm,
fact that this person, and the way that he left too, was so, we talked about it for 48 hours. It was agreed upon. It was like, we are incompatible. I need to go here. You need to go there. You want this. I want this. It wasn't like anything cheating or negative or abuse or anything like that. It just, the relationship ended. And I remember laying there going, I should not be this sad for someone moving out of my space. And it was such a wake up call to me. And I thank God that he existed, because he was the first person that I fell so deeply in love with that the loss of that connection destroyed me. And probably took me a good 6 months. I got the same therapist then. I've been with her almost 2 years now,
mm.
and she keeps trying to graduate me now. She's like, "Girl, you're good. Like, can you?" And I'm like, "Yeah, but you're like my friend at this point, so I'm just gonna keep coming." But so she just graduated me to once a month. She goes, You're done. You're good. Like, we're good now." But so I think I would say that that's what did it. And I think for anyone listening, there are moments, and maybe people are going through right now. Maybe they already did. You can remember a moment where everything burned to the ground. It's an unavoidable tragedy that undoubtedly makes you better if you let it, comma, if you let it, because we can also go back to bad vices or a second relationship or whatever. And I thought, I never, ever, ever, ever want someone to look at me and say, I don't want to date you anymore. I don't want you to be my girlfriend anymore. This isn't right. And move out of my house and not go, okay, it's been really lovely. Obviously, I'm sad. You're my best friend, but I wish you happiness. That's the healthy, secure response.
Mhm.
And then anxious attachment style is, it's a death level abandonment. And so that's where I started learning about attachment styles. And once I fixed that, it's been a lot easier for me to be okay, because it was this monster that was living in me. Like, don't leave, don't
Mhm.
abandon me. And so I think that for me, it was against my will. my my greatest healing was COVID, and then the loss of that relationship, all in the same 6 month period. So
Oh my gosh. No, but I love the way that you put that, especially when you ended it, right? With everything, when you talk about thinking back to this moment in your life, like where everything burned to the ground, but like you said, it can make you better if you let it. And
yeah,
that's so beautiful because it's true. Like when I think back to these scenarios, right? Very, very similar to you actually, when you talk about that relationship. Actually for me something same, like literally like where it's like anxious attachment then completely avoidant, and then
yep,
it's like you
yep,
can't just be in the middle, you can't just like
yep,
there's no new it's like I have to be
yeah,
this or extreme, and it's always like the
yeah,
extremes. And it's so beautiful when you can look back on that and then and still be like, I learned this from that and I was able to grow,
yes,
but not with like, even with the like just things that were, so bad, especially when you're talking about like sexual assault and things like that. And like thinking
yeah.
like this happened to me and like I went through this experiences, but what did that do? Like I'm speaking about it and
Mhm.
talking about it because, trying to help others. But I love that you bring that
Yep,
up because the pain of losing that was, like you said, like your best friend. And you also brought up the way in which it happened too, which wasn't like this crazy disastrous thing. Like he cheated, this
mm-mm.
happened, you had this conversation, 48 hours, agreed to this, but then still having that, because I know for me, like that's definitely something that, for me, like in with relationships, almost like, like, having to like have this, and it's such a dependence. And if it isn't there, like I can't wake up, I can't like breathe anymore. And it's
Yeah,
and it's hard to actually take the time, like, and like I really similar to what you did, doing research on this, right? Like learning about this, like, okay,
attachment styles.
why am I, what does this mean, and going back to that on those unhealed traumas that you brought up, like you literally
Yeah,
mentioned this, having that severe neglect, severe criticism, unhappy parents, and like having that bleed through when you were growing up and seeing that, because it's very true. And even sometimes when you can't see it, like in different things that I've experienced where you don't see it on the outside, but then you realize later that this is really the reality. And you're like, what? Like, I thought this was this.
yeah,
And it's like, and then you're like, what has my life been? And then just really being able to say, okay, what is my role in this? And what is my responsibility, like moving forward? Like, what can I do with this? Because like you said, you can either let that continue, and it is hard, it's not easy
so
work.
hard.
It's not like I feel
Takes a
like,
long time.
and it takes, and it's like, again, once you do it, it's still about the steps of maintaining that, which you mentioned, which is comes
Yes,
down to the relationships and the habits that
yes,
you have in place and doing the work that you're doing and building other people up and uplifting other people and showing them that, what you've been able to create and do this, that the fact that other people can do that as well. And it's amazing because, like I remember the first time we met, I think we were in the elevator going up to Devin
oh
was showing
yeah,
us. And I remember I was like, who's this girl with the pink? I was like, the tips. And then I was like,
yeah,
she's so like, you were just so inviting in a way. Cause I feel
mm,
like I'm always like the one who's like, I'm gonna go say hi to people. I'm gonna go like, hi, hi, hi.
yeah,
Like, I don't know you yet, but hi, what's up? How's your day and everything? And you were like that with me. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, who is this? And then I was like, wow, like, cause I just could feel it. I don't know what it was, but I just like, I was like something like with, the way that
hmm,
you were, I was like, I don't know what it is, but I just feel like it's going to resonate a lot with me. And I love that you are so willing to do that, especially on a level when we're talking about vulnerability for mental health and diving into this. So like I love if you can
yeah,
kind of, share a little bit too, like for someone who just wants to like learn about this and get started with
I love
spiritual,
it.
like what would you say to that person?
Yeah. Okay, I love that you said that, because what I was thinking is, to put into application a lot of the things we've been talking about, I guess it's not necessarily air quotes spiritual, but to learn
Mhm.
about attachment styles, to learn what we're talking about, for anyone listening who feels really drawn, like your relationships are a push pull, hot cold, you're either consistently anxious or you feel like you're shutting down. So one of the things that my partner of 3 years and I got obsessed with was this. And now we both have navigated into a secure space. So everyone falls on a continuum. secure being in the middle, and then you have avoidant on one end, meaning you really crave intimacy. Both people crave intimacy, but avoidant people, when they experience it, they shut down and get scared. Their nervous system does it for them. It's not a conscious choice. And then anxious people, a natural, normal experience with someone will make them feel anxious, like they need to gravitate towards them even harder. So there's a book called Attached, which is how I started learning about this. And you talk about when you met me, how you felt something. What we're all trying to do is clear out our cup, right? Like my cup was full of muddy, anxious attachment water. And when people would come in my space, let's say they were someone who has a secure attachment style. If you have a breakup with somebody and you're a secure attachment style, you're able to still care about them. You're able to still function that week. You're able to, even if sad, you're able to understand logically the reasons in which the relationship needs to end, and you maintain friendship with the person usually. So if you want to know, am I in a secure connection or a secure partnership, which I know you are, like I met your fiance now, and I'm sure you're like shaking your head because you're like, oh, I've had the opposite, and now I have what you're talking about.
Crazy.
It's like I'm choosing you because I choose you. And then those relationships usually don't disintegrate because you're choosing the person from that pure place. And anyways, so I would say attachment is the underlying glue in which we're all dating from. And for me, dating avoidance, people who shut down in intimate moments, people who have a hard time expressing their feelings, it makes me become incredibly anxious. And so if I'm with someone who's secure, I become secure because I'm very close to that secure. But if I accidentally choose a partner, and you'll look for these signs by I'm sitting in a date and I feel very, very anxious. I feel very on edge. I feel like I'm trying to make them like me. And an avoidant person would sit there and go, oh, I'm scared. I feel a little smothered. I wonder if she's going to take away my free time. Like she knows that I don't have enough time for a relationship, right? Maybe I should just remind her that I don't want a girlfriend right now. So it's these conversations that when you pay attention, I'm also avoidant. So 5% or so, they say, have both. It's where one caretaker was really clingy and one was completely absentee. And then you get what's called like that's like what you just described, having both, which is a really fun time. So to wrap all of that up, I feel like no matter how spiritual you are, relationships are the container for healing. You find the right partner, the right love partner, the right spiritual person, whether that's a best friend or a romantic connection, you heal. So when you remove your attachment wound, your attachment trauma, find a hold me tight therapist, and it can also be called like an EFT, emotional freedom technique therapist. It will clear out all the bullshit so that you're able to find the partners that are going to spiritually, emotionally heal your sad, abused little 8-year-old that just needs love. Otherwise, and we all know, we see 40, 50-year-old men starting their life over, going back to date 20 or 30-year-old women. And women get so triggered by this, but it's like they're doing it to relive a piece of themselves that they're now ready to heal. And we get so mad about that, but it's like a lot of times men, they completely shut down. They lose decades of their life because they choose the wrong partner, and then they feel loyal to the kids, and then they'll stay there for whatever. So there's a lot that goes before becoming like spiritual and doing spiritual healing. There's a lot of logical things we can do to evaluate, why is my life like this? And then working with healers and stuff to kind of strengthen your decision-making process. I'm still attracted to avoidant people. It's happening right now. I'm still in that place where I go, Brittany, that feeling, that anxious feeling, that's a no. That's a no. You know better, and the conscious awareness of it keeps me from making decisions. And so, yeah.
That's amazing though, that you have that now, because that's something that for me, like I never even had the awareness. Like I had to work to get it to be like, oh, okay, now you're doing that thing where you're going to sabotage what you're trying to do. And it's like, it's when you do this and you start doing the research and doing the work and getting around more of these people and having more of these conversations, it almost does almost become like a healthy addiction. Like I'm into learning and like growing instead of like running away, distraction, and having like that facade that you mentioned, which I did the same thing where I would go into relationships and it's like, wow, she's great. And then it's like, oh, what? Like, and same, same, like, okay. But same thing. So I absolutely love everything that you have said and brought to the table. Like I literally have this entire page, like doodle covered everything. Like I'm going to put in the notes for sure, because I mean, you guys, her story is just so incredible and so powerful. And these tips, I definitely encourage you to check this out and do research on this if you feel called in these areas, if you're experiencing these different things like in your life or anywhere in your life, in your relationships, whatever it is. If you just want to learn more and see how can I apply these strategies to things that I've gone through, or maybe a friend that you have or someone you care about that is going through something that you want to learn how to be more supportive and understanding, definitely encourage you to check into these things that you mentioned of Reiki, sound healing, EFT, doing the research on these different topics, going to a cute little bookstore, checking out Amazon, whatever you want to do, looking up some hashtags on Instagram, whatever your jam is. So, and the last thing I want to ask you, I love asking everyone this because everyone always has a great answer that's always so different. So, if you could tell me, Britt, the one thing that you are doing right now to master your mental, what does that look like?
I love that okay, so when you were halfway through that sentence, I kept hearing the word pray, pray, pray. And I was like, okay, I'm supposed to tell them to pray. So
Yes, yes, yes,
I
yes.
think that the bypass, right? The magic ticket, the train ticket to a better life is prayer, because we can't see the whole board. We can't see the whole game. We only are seeing one stair step. We don't see the whole staircase. So I think mastering your mental, like, if you spent a whole week with me, you wouldn't see the cracks in my foundation. You'd have a great time. We'd fall in love with each other in, in a friendship sense, and we would go back to our lives. You'd be like, that was a really powerful week. But that doesn't still mean that there's not still work to be done for myself, especially, right? Especially severe trauma. I mean, it haunts you. And there are still specific incidences where you'll be tripped back in. But I think, like, the prayer piece is so important for me, because even if I feel really, really, really bad, I can say, please, like, I just hand this over. Just please I want to feel better. I want to experience joy. I want to be happy. And that helps me, because whereas before I was living in a victim energy. Oh no, so and so left, or oh no, I'm broke, or oh no, I'm this, it was victim. Whereas now I think, oh, well, so and so must have left because I prayed that I wanted to be happier. And that's really interesting. Something better must be coming. And think about your mental health. What is the worst feeling? One of them is helplessness. Oh God. And there's nothing quite like that. When you think, I have nothing and no one, and I'm alone, and this is awful. And so I think that that's where prayer is. It's empowering. And I always say, I'm like, whether it's true or whether it's not true, that's not the conversation. Does prayer work? Does prayer not work? That's not the conversation. I'm not forcing people into it. I'm saying it makes you feel better. And that's really the goal. And I say, if I get to the end of my life and somebody says, all this stuff that you've been talking about with your purple hair and your bullshit and your glitter is all fake, I'm going to say, I lived a better life because I fully believed it, because I prayed, because I stopped, and I believed in a higher power. And I said, just help me, please, please help me.
Oh my gosh.
So if nothing else, if you don't have access to, to the right therapist or the medication or the treatment that you need, just pray and pray like crazy. And I believe that.
No, that is so powerful. And I love that you shared that and expressed that in a way that everyone can tap into and have that moment to do that, any time of the day, whenever it is, to get that out there and just to do that. Because when these things start to come into our life, and then when people are leaving and different things are moving around, like you said, you prayed, you asked for this, and it's coming, but it might not always look like the way that you think it's going to look like, because like you said, we only see one stair step. We don't see the whole staircase. Okay. So that's how it is. So absolutely. And again, okay, one more thing. Tell everyone, where can they find more of Brit Shane?
Yeah. Awesome. And I have a 30-second thing that I want to add on to the prayer thing too.
Yes.
So I just want to say this. They're intuitively telling me to say that. I'll give you an example of my life right now. So I was talking to one of my coaches, and I had been manifesting something specific for the month of April. And it never goes 2 weeks without me having something going on, like a training or something. I do tattoo training. That's how I make my money. And I said, this is so weird. I'm praying. And I'm like, it's not coming, the specific thing that I was asking for. And she said, you are so tired. You are so burnt out. She goes, stop asking. The universe is trying to give you some space. And this was a week ago. And guess what? I woke up 2 days ago, and I think you probably saw me post. I'm like, I have never been so tired. Like, my body, I went to bed, I think at like 8 p.m. last night. And my body in advance said, Britt, you can't work this week. So this is like the first week in the history of time. I got a gray schedule. There's nothing there. And my coach said, if May is busy and March was insane and April's chill, you need chill. Like, will you stop asking? They're trying to give you a nap, So sometimes I think if you're praying and it's not coming, sometimes it's not meant for you. It's not what's in the highest good. So if you add at the end or something better or for my highest good, you'll always be like in the vein. But
Oh my gosh. Yes.
you can find me at Brit_Shane, BRIT_SHANE on Instagram. Or you can email me hello@britshane.com. And yeah, look forward to helping you guys, talking to you. You need a
Yes, we
spiritual
love it.
mentor, get me at me.
We love it. We love it. We love it. And again, I want to say a big thank you to you guys for being here, tuning in and listening to these incredible tips and stories and being here because it means the world to me and I can't express it in words. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And I hope that you have an amazing rest of the day or night, whatever time it is that you're listening. And I got to say bye to Brit as well. And thank you for being here. So love you guys and bye, Brit. Bye.
Bye.